The morning sun was just beginning to warm the marble walls of the enormous mansion when Mr. Victor Hale stepped out onto his balcony. From there, he could see almost the entire estate: perfect lawns, tall trees, a small lake, and the long garden path that wound through rows of roses. Victor Hale was a billionaire known across the country. People described him as powerful, intelligent, and impossibly strict. His companies employed thousands of people, and every detail of his life was carefully controlled. Except one. His daughter. 8-year-old Emily Hale was the only person in the world who could soften him. Since her mother had passed away 3 years earlier, Victor had become both father and mother to her. Yet despite all his wealth, he often felt he was failing. Emily hated school. Every tutor he hired lasted only a few weeks. Some said she was distracted. Others said she refused to listen. A few claimed she was simply not good at math. Victor didn't believe that. But he also didn't know how to help her. That morning, as he stood on the balcony, something unusual caught his attention. Down in the garden, near the rose bushes, Emily was sitting on a wooden bench. Beside her stood the new gardener. Victor frowned slightly. The gardener had been hired only 2 weeks earlier. His name was Daniel. A quiet man in his early 30s who rarely spoke more than necessary. He worked carefully, always focused on trimming hedges, watering plants, and cleaning the pathways. But now he wasn't holding gardening tools. Instead, he was holding a stick and writing something in the dirt. Victor leaned forward. Emily was watching closely. Her small hand held another stick, and she was copying the symbols Daniel drew. Numbers. Victor narrowed his eyes. Daniel wrote a long equation in the soil. Emily studied it, tilted her head, then scratched out part of it and replaced it with another number. Daniel smiled and nodded. Victor froze. The equation was far too complex for an 8-year-old. Even from the balcony, Victor recognized pieces of advanced algebra. His first reaction was irritation. Why was the gardener distracting his daughter from schoolwork? But something about the scene made him pause. Emily looked excited. He hadn't seen that expression on her face in months. Victor quietly walked downstairs and stepped outside without announcing himself. He approached slowly along the stone path. Neither Daniel nor Emily noticed him at first. Daniel was saying gently, "Think about the pattern. If this number doubles each step, what happens here?" Emily frowned, then her face lit up. "Oh. It becomes 16. Daniel nodded. "Exactly." Emily laughed. "I never saw it like that before." Victor stopped just a few feet away. Emily suddenly looked up and gasped. "Daddy." Daniel immediately straightened. "I'm sorry, sir," he said calmly. "I didn't mean to." Victor cut him off. "What exactly are you doing?" Emily quickly said, "He's teaching me math." Victor looked down at the dirt. The equation was definitely not elementary math. In fact, it looked like something from a college textbook. Victor slowly turned his eyes toward Daniel. "Where did you learn this?" Daniel hesitated slightly. "School." Victor studied him carefully. Daniel didn't look nervous. He didn't look arrogant either. Just calm. Emily tugged Victor's sleeve. "Daddy, he explains it better than my tutors." Victor's voice remained serious. "You're a gardener." "Yes, sir." "And you're teaching advanced algebra." "Yes, sir." Victor crossed his arms. "Why?" Daniel glanced at Emily. "She asked about the pattern in the flowers," he said. So I showed her how numbers work the same way. Victor stared at him for several seconds. Then he said something that surprised both of them. Continue. Emily's eyes widened. Really? Victor nodded once. I want to see. Daniel looked uncertain but returned to the dirt and wrote another equation. Emily leaned forward eagerly. Victor watched every movement carefully. For the next 10 minutes, Daniel guided Emily through a complicated math problem step by step. But he didn't lecture. He asked questions. He let her think. And every time she struggled, he explained the idea in a way that made her eyes light up again. Victor had hired the best tutors money could buy. None of them had done this. Finally Emily solved the equation on her own. She jumped up happily. I did it. Victor felt something unexpected inside his chest. Pride. Daniel brushed the dirt from his hands. I should get back to work, he said quietly. But Victor spoke before he could leave. Wait. Daniel stopped. Victor's voice was calm but firm. You're not just a gardener. Daniel didn't answer immediately. Victor continued. Where did you study? A long silence followed. Then Daniel said softly, MIT. Victor blinked. The answer sounded absurd. Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Yes. Victor studied his face. Daniel wasn't joking. Why are you working here as a gardener? Daniel looked down at the soil. That's a long story. Emily looked between them. Daddy, can he keep teaching me? Victor ignored the question for the moment. He walked slowly around Daniel, observing him like a puzzle. Finally he said something unexpected. Come to my office. Daniel looked surprised. Sir. Now. Emily frowned. But my lesson. Victor looked at her gently. We'll talk about that later. Victor's office inside the mansion was enormous, lined with bookshelves and glass windows overlooking the estate. Daniel stood quietly near the desk. Victor sat down slowly. MIT graduates don't usually become gardeners. Daniel nodded slightly. No. So explain. Daniel took a breath. 5 years ago, I was a research mathematician. Victor leaned back. And Daniel continued calmly. I was working on a project related to encryption algorithms. Victor's interest sharpened immediately. Encryption was extremely valuable in finance and technology. What happened? Daniel looked toward the window. The company funding the research decided to use it for something illegal. Victor's expression hardened. I refused. And I became the scapegoat. Victor's eyes narrowed. You were blamed. Yes. For fraud I didn't commit. Victor understood that situation all too well. Powerful companies often buried people like that. Why gardening? Daniel gave a small smile. Plants don't lie. Victor studied him for a long moment. Then he asked a question that changed everything. Do you miss mathematics? Daniel didn't hesitate. Every day. Victor slowly turned his chair toward the window overlooking the garden where Emily was waiting. Then he said quietly, my daughter solved 3 problems today. Daniel nodded. She's extremely bright. Victor looked back sharply. Bright. Daniel met his gaze. She sees patterns naturally. She just hasn't been taught the right way. Victor felt something tighten in his chest again. For years he had worried something was wrong with Emily. Maybe nothing was. Maybe the problem was the teachers. Victor leaned forward. I want you to teach her. Daniel blinked. As a tutor. I'm a gardener. Not anymore. Daniel hesitated. I can't accept charity. Victor almost smiled. This isn't charity. He opened a drawer and placed a document on the desk. I run one of the largest technology companies in the world. Daniel nodded slightly. I know who you are. Victor continued. I've been searching for someone to lead a new research division. Daniel looked confused. For what? Victor tapped the desk slowly. Advanced encryption systems. Daniel froze. Victor's eyes were steady. I checked your record while you were standing here. Daniel looked shocked. You already? Yes. Victor folded his hands. You were framed. Daniel's voice dropped. You believe that? Victor nodded once. Because the math checks out. Daniel stared at him silently. Then Victor added something unexpected. And because Emily trusts you. For the first time, Daniel looked genuinely emotional. Victor stood. Teach my daughter. He slid the document across the desk. And rebuild your career. Daniel looked down at the contract. Research director. A salary that would change anyone's life. He looked up slowly. Why me? Victor answered simply. Because a real teacher explains math in the dirt. A long silence filled the room. Then Daniel smiled slightly. Emily will be happy. Victor nodded. That matters most. Outside, the little girl was already drawing numbers in the soil again, waiting for her gardener teacher to return. But now he was something much more. And Victor Hale had just discovered that the quiet man trimming roses might be the most valuable mind he had ever hired. And the most important teacher his daughter would ever have.